I'm Sharon Worsley, the business ninja and author of Wake Up, Shake Up, and Show Up, How to Live Life on Purpose. And on today's episode of Dove Barron's Leadership Loyalty Show, we're going to be talking about what it takes to wake up, shake up, and show up in your leadership. Also, I'm going to talk about what it means when I say you have to be a leader in your own life before you can ever lead other people. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dove Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dove Barron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dove Barron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dove Barron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dove Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to be looking at why you have to be a leader in your own life before you can ever lead other people. If you're a new listener, a new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. And also GNA cited us in the top 10 podcasts for HR pros and employers. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant. So get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Watching and listening to this show, you're a high-level executive, an entrepreneur, a sales leader, or a leader in some capacity. And as a leader and entrepreneur, you know the demands are high. But how do you balance out those external demands with your own need, your own desire to go for gold? Well, our guest today is Sharon Worsley. Sharon is the business ninja. She is widely recognized as one of the most practical presenters on business building ideas, personal leadership, and networking. Sharon says that most people are living their lives on autopilot and then wonder why they seem to be struggling. Sharon is committed to inspire you to wake up to your present circumstances, shake up your mindset, and she will show you the simple yet powerful strategies to show up fully in your own life, your career, your business, and even your community. She's the author of a new book called Wake Up, Shake Up, and Show Up, How to Live a Life on Purpose. Sharon has successfully coached a wide variety of individuals, from sales professionals to CEOs to multi-millionaires, to get past their internal obstacles in life, things like procrastination, poor mindset, and self-defeating attitudes. On top of all of her ongoing success, Sharon runs something called the Toronto Skirt Club, which I am going to attend. And you have to wear a skirt. Sharon is also the author of Timeless Secrets for Creating Clients for Life, the important how-tos of growing your business today, tomorrow, and beyond. So please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Sharon Worsley. Woo!
Thank you.
Crowd goes wild. Good to have you, Sharon.
Thank you. I can hear all the cheers already.
There
No
you go.
pressure.
It's good to have you on. So I was saying in the intro there that you and I have something in common in that we both live in Canada. We have an Aussie connection. Sort of bring the world in on our Aussie connection. Tell us a little bit about your Aussie background.
Well, I originally was born in Montreal, Canada, but when I was 9 years old, my family sold everything, moved across the country, and traveled down to Australia. It's interesting because I say Australia, very Australian.
Australia,
I
nice.
can't get rid of that. That and today usually give me away. So I lived in Australia for 18 years, also a year in Papua New Guinea, and I'm sure many people here have probably never heard of Papua New Guinea, but it's a very small island, and it was a very interesting experience.
Sure.
And then a number of years ago, I decided that I was going to come back to Canada for what I thought would be a year, because typically Aussies, especially the young ones, travel for about a year abroad, mostly backpacking around Europe. And I decided that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And because I had dual citizenship and I worked in the travel industry, I decided I'd come here to work selling travel basically to Australia, and I never left. It just was a great synergy for what I was looking for in my life. And now I live in Toronto. I have a beautiful view of downtown Toronto, and just love being in actually, I think the UN has actually said it's the most multiculturally diverse city in the world.
Yeah,
and for me, that's one of the biggest benefits of living here.
One of the things you just said that I want to bring everybody to so they can get it is, you talked about you came to Canada in the hospitality world.
Yeah.
So in your previous career life, you were in hospitality. But tell us, I want people to get this because I'm sure most people don't know this. Tell us about the moment that business, your moment in that business that changed your life. Because you and I had talked about it offline before. There was this moment where being in the hospitality business changed forever. What was that moment?
I think you're referring to an episode when I worked at my hotel. Is that the one that, yeah.
That's the one.
Wow. That was actually 2 years ago this month. So I had had a career in multiple areas of the hospitality industry. For instance, worked for Qantas in Australia before I moved up. I had been a professional meeting planner, a negotiator, supplier relations, and so on. And the last area I really thought I wanted to work in that was, for me, the excellence that I wanted to have was in the hotel industry. Mm-hmm. So for about 13 years, I was a senior sales manager at an independent hotel in downtown Toronto, 4-star hotel. And, there's those, like you're saying, there's those pivotal moments that can change your life forever. And for a number of years, actually for about 13 years, I'd also been running my own business in the evenings and weekends as a professional coach and speaker. But I had never jumped in fully for a number of reasons. I didn't want necessarily to always take a coaching client as an example because I had a mortgage to pay by giving up a full-time income. But I knew that there was going to be a point where I'm going to have to say I'm either all in or I'm all out. And that happened in the most unusual way that you're referring to. So to set the scene, I was listening to the radio one morning, getting ready for work. And the radio announcer came on and made exactly these words, verbatim. 12-year-old boy, death at a downtown hotel, murdered. And then the person went away to a commercial. And my immediate thought, of course, was for the family because they hadn't given any specifics. So I could only imagine how tragic that must be for the family, whatever the circumstances. And then I next thought of the staff at that hotel. Because having worked at a hotel for so long, I know what it's like as a team to have to deal with certain situations, but never as bad as that. Mm-hmm. And that was going through my mind. And all of a sudden, the commercial ended. The announcer came back and named my hotel. And I remember catching my breath and then thinking, oh my gosh. Like I couldn't even think of what to say. No. So I called the hotel immediately, kind of got some specifics, went to the hotel right away. And, there's the forensic truck there, the police, the media, guests, and so on. And for the next several days, it was a bit of a roller coaster with taking care of inquiries from our corporate clients, dealing with the guests in the hotel, dealing with staff that had to witness the after effects of this.
Wow.
And it really just got me thinking, Dov, life is way too short. And a 12-year-old boy has died. And I will say for anyone listening, wondering, it was not anything to do with the hotel. He was staying with his father and his 20-year-old brother who lived in Toronto. The young boy and his father were visiting from Asia. And the older brother, we think, had some sort of mental disorder, and he ended up by stabbing his brother. And the young boy died. He bled out in the hallway of our hotel, and big tragedy. So I wanted to use that tragedy in a way that I could get something out of it for good, so that I would fully jump. And so I did that about 2 years ago. Pretty much a few days afterwards, I handed in my notice and then started working on building out my business in a bigger way.
But you've been, as you said, you've been coaching people in leadership and in business for a long time. This is just, that was the point of like, okay, I'm done.
And now it's about to do this full time and not sit behind a desk and sell heads in beds, as we would refer to it. Not that there's anything wrong with that,
No.
but I had fulfilled the desire I'd always wanted to work at a hotel, and it was way overdue. And I find in life sometimes you get the little whispers from the universe, if you want to call it that. Sometimes it's a little noisier, and then eventually it can be right in your face. And that experience was a right in your face moment for me.
Personally, I know nothing of those kinds of things. I've never had that happen to me.
Yeah.
The whisper becomes a punch in the head, or it throws you off a mountain. But that's just me. Hey, everybody has their own process.
For sure, yeah.
Now, leaders, and by that I mean I don't mean managers, although some people can be both, are, I believe, natural achievers. They're driven to achieve. And in the intro, I spoke about the need or the desire to go for your personal goal. In your latest book, you write about our personal Olympics. Tell us what you mean by personal Olympics.
Well, it was interesting because I wrote that particular chapter a number of years ago when I was actually out in Vancouver when the Olympics were out there. And there were a lot of stories on the news and the media about how these people, the athletes, had dedicated their lives to performing at their best. And I remember standing there with, the rings that are symbolic of the Olympics. I was standing there near one that had been put in the park. And I just thought of, what are our personal Olympics? Where do we fall short? What can we do? And actually, it was more of me. And then, of course, it led on to other people as I shared this with people. But it was more of, where am I living in a little bit of mediocrity or on, as you said earlier, autopilot? What is it that I want to strive for? And it doesn't have to be an athlete at the Olympics. It could be in any area of your life or all areas of your life. And for me, I started looking at, what could I do differently? Even sometimes little things matter. It's like compound interest. You take a penny and you invest it, and then it becomes two, and so on. And for a lot of people, they don't see that it's a big deal if they want to make a change. But it's those small degrees that can make a huge difference if we're either on course or off course. And one of the things that I talk about with my clients and audiences is in the area of, imagine you're on a plane, you're getting on a plane in Toronto at Pearson Airport, and you're flying to Honolulu International Airport. Well, before the pilot takes off, they have, or someone has put into a black box, a guidance system, shall you say, that it shows the coordinates of where they're going to land in roughly 9 hours. But when the plane takes off, and some people don't even realize this, even if they've been passengers on a plane, that they don't realize that most of the time the plane is off course. But because the program, or in the case of human beings, goals, we'll use that as another word, have been set, and we know where it is that we want to go, it keeps course correcting and putting us on track so that whether it be 9 hours from now or 5 years or 3 weeks or whatever it is for you, you end up landing in Honolulu International. And so, I find that going to the Olympics, actually I didn't go to the Olympics, it was post-Olympics, I was at a seminar, but they had still the signs up. It caused me to really start questioning what were my Olympics, or what could I do? How could I achieve something higher? And again, it doesn't have to be much. It's not like you wake up today and think, my whole life is going to change. It could be a 5% change at a time, and even then, it adds up.
It's interesting because, even using the analogy of an Olympics, I think immediately people go to something massive.
Yeah.
They start thinking, oh my goodness, because Olympians are the elite of the elite. They're not just elite; they're the elite of the elite.
Sure.
And I think that one of the things that in reading through your materials in your book is that you try to bring people back to it not being about that it's actually about very human things and about very personal things. I would, if you would be willing, I would love for you to share something that was, a personal goal, because I'll tell you something before I go into it, and that's this. We set goals, and invariably people are disheartened for a couple of reasons. One, they don't hit the goal, or two, if they hit the goal, it doesn't really lighten up their life in the way that they imagined. And because there's a mindset that having achieved it, I'm there, so I should be happy for the rest of my life. You have a bit of a different look at goals and a different thing. So I'd really like for you to share with us a personal goal that you went for and how you keep yourself on track for that goal on a daily basis. Because I've read your personal story, I know a little bit about you, and I'd love for that to be shared with our audience.
Well, I think that, and I'm not sure if maybe the part that has come up for you in reading it was my weight loss journey. And yeah, okay. So for many years, I have really struggled with my weight. And so about 2 or so years, a little bit over 2 years or so, I happened to move to where I live now, and it was just down the street from a gym. So I thought this is a perfect opportunity. So I went to the gym, and I will admit, first of all, I'm not a cardio person. I admire anyone that is. I am definitely not a cardio person. And sometimes with me, I just go all in, but it takes me a while to sort of warm up. And I made the decision that I was going to work out lifting weights. And so I went and joined the gym. And in the gym that I'm in, there's a spot in the gym called the pit. And it's actually a lower level of the gym. So it technically is structurally a pit. And in this pit, there's mostly men that are very dedicated to working out, or there are those that are, just attempting to or learning. And then there's a few women. And when I say a few, I mean literally a few. For instance, on our last public holiday here last month, there were 20 people in one section of the pit. 19 of them were men, and then there was me. so it's really fun. But interestingly, I would go and watch these men work out and see what they were doing, and then I would start using the machines or the free weight. Then I would come home at night, and I'd get into bed with my iPad, and I'd go to a site called bodybuilding.com, which has a ton of videos. And I would watch the videos, first of all, to see that I already had the best form possible that I was watching these other people use, because as many people are aware, just because you go to the gym does not mean you're doing it correctly.
Absolutely.
And so I would do that. And then I'd also see, is there a variation, or could I be more efficient at that particular exercise? So that's really what I did. And there's a machine called the unilateral leg press. So anyone listening that's not familiar with this, it's basically a leg press where you sit down in it. There are 2 plates that are separate, and then you have to load on the weight. So it's not like you go to a pin and then just move the pin to another weight. This one you physically have to lift weights as high as 45 pounds to put on the machine. So when I started working out on the machine, I was using 30 pounds as my minimum. So 15 aside, 30 pounds. And I did the calculation one day that the most that the machine can hold is 10 45-pound weights, so 450 pounds. So I set that as my goal. I don't know why. I just did. And so the interesting thing for anyone that's listening to this to know is it wasn't about racing to get up there. It was about little by little. Kind of, we were talking before about compound interest.
Exactly.
This is compound interest in weight. So every time I went, I'd add on a little bit more. I'd sort of do what I did the previous time, then I'd add on a little bit more to push myself a little more. And I would just keep going along that way. Sometimes I would have to go back to, so I lost the gain, I'd have to go back. But over a period of time, I did it. In about 4 months, I went from 30 pounds to 450 pounds.
That's amazing.
Now, the interesting thing is, and actually sometimes when I speak to audiences, many people don't have the perception of how big or how much 450 pounds is. So I asked 2 of the guys that are bodybuilders at the gym to stand in front of that machine so I could take a picture. And they actually combined, and they're very fit, muscular men. They weighed combined 405 pounds. So I actually pushed 45 pounds more than them. So it's more of a visual. But had I have not convinced myself that I could do this, I would have given up. Now, do I push 450 every time I go? No, I don't need to.
No.
My body does other things. I kind of spread out what I do, but I'm sure that there are, and in fact, I know there are people that go there and see me do this that must be thinking, plus size, middle-aged woman, what could she possibly do? And then,
So, yeah, I mean, it's a great example because I think that when it comes to goals, people have this mindset of there's a place you go to and then you're there.
yeah,
And also that if I'm not there every day, then I'm not there. I mean, there's all kinds of nonsense goes on in the head.
yeah,
So, for instance, I mean, just using the analogy you use, I've been a bodybuilder for 40 years, for zero
yeah.
for most people.
You started at 1 year old.
Yeah, dirt in the eye. Okay, but my best leg press is 1,600 pounds,
Right.
right, which is an insane amount of weight.
It
Do
is.
I do 1,600 pounds? Well, that was a goal. That was something I
Yeah.
wanted to achieve. Did I do it for a while? Yeah, I did it for about a year. But like,
Right.
I don't push 1,600 pounds. That's not my goal anymore. So
Perfect.
the other thing is that goals are not final lines. And this is, I think, part
Yeah.
of the thing. Goals are needing to be reassessed because if your outcome is different, so for instance, using weight loss as an example, if you're looking to lose 50 pounds or 100 pounds, the nutritional situation is going to be a different situation than when you've lost that 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Then it's going to be the day after when you're going, okay, now what's maintenance? So it's the same thing with the goals in your life, and I think this is an important thing. So let's flip that for a moment and take that into the context of business and of leadership, and particularly in the context of what you're speaking about with your latest book, which is Wake Up, Shake Up, and Show Up, How to Live a Life on Purpose. Put this in context of how this is most practical to a C-suite individual. So somebody who's a C-suite, or even for that matter, a high-level entrepreneur.
Right. Well, actually, I'm going to go just quickly back to the weightlifting
Sure.
as an example where many clients I've had in the past have been very, say, challenged in setting big goals, because the number one thing they'll say to me is, well, what if I reach it? Then what? And it's like, well, then you've achieved it. But in their mind, they've limited through a limiting belief thought, well, then what do I do from there?
Right.
Or if I say, okay, in your life, say in your business right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you as far as achievement, satisfaction, and so on? They'll go a 9. Well, what would it take to a 10? Oh, I can never get to a 10. Why not? Because then what will I do now? Set another goal. It's like, for me, I did the 450 because that's all that machine will hold. I've actually been told I should ask one of these guys to sit on it so I could push more. I'm actually contemplating that. But my point here is I went from there, I set a new goal because I went as high as I could on the leg press on that particular machine. Then I set a goal for a bench press. So my upper body, I wanted to do something differently. So there's no way I will ever run out of goals in the weight room. And like someone that you're talking about, a C-suite leader, to set whether it be business or personal goals, you may achieve something in one of those areas, but there's always going to be another goal that you can put in that area to push you a little bit further. There is never going to be a time when you will ever run out of goals. But some people with very limited beliefs think, well, if I achieve that, then what? Same as some people will say to me, it's not about the journey, it's about the destination. For me, it's actually the whole thing. It's the journey and the destination. We were talking earlier about Olympians. A lot of Olympians that I've heard talk about their achievement, it'd be great if they won the gold medal. But for them, it's more about pushing their particular boundaries. So if they can break their personal record, it doesn't matter what the gold medalist did. Maybe they placed 5th or 6th, but providing they push themselves further than they had done before that moment. And with leaders, it's very much like that too. You talk about the title of my book. And for me, it is very important to wake up to what's going on, to understand where you are right now. I deal with, for instance, a lot of small and medium-sized business owners who just look at what revenue they have on the books, what's coming in. They don't stop to look at things like, why are my past clients not coming back to me? What is my competition doing that I can do differently, or I can up my game so I can be more competitive? And also, as a leader, how do my staff feel? Mm-hmm. It's interesting that a lot of leaders are very concerned about finding out how they are perceived by their staff. Whether it be termed ego or insecurity, whatever it is, they don't take the time to find out what's important to their staff.
Right.
They're also not often concerned about helping their staff be the best person that person can be. You mentioned before, I have this belief, you have to be a leader in your own life before you can ever lead other people.
Absolutely.
And with the many, many leaders I have coached or spoken to over a number of years now, it has convinced me more than ever that you have to have not your life perfect, but you have to be working on your own life, your own areas of improvement, your own areas of strength and lesser strengths or weaknesses if you want, so that from there you can be a more effective leader. I give the example, we talked actually about me working for a hotel in the past. So I often will ask people, if you were to build a 20-story hotel right now, would you build it from the ground up? And usually they go, well, no, of course not. Why not? Well, if I just do it from the ground up, it could fall over. Or if there was a hurricane or there was a car or something banged into it or an earthquake, it'll fall over. Okay, so how deep would you build the foundation? Well, they conclude the higher they want to rise the building, the deeper the foundation, so it levels out.
Absolutely.
So I use that as an analogy for the bigger a leader you want to be, or the more inspiring a leader, or the more effective, or the one that makes such a difference, then the deeper you have to build your own personal foundation, whatever that's going to take.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that this is one of the greatest challenges for leaders today, is that they see that, you know, by virtue of skills or intelligence, whatever one wants to call it, they have risen to the ranks and become a leader. And very often leaders do rise through the ranks and fail miserably.
Yeah.
And the reason they do is because they've risen through the ranks through their skills, through their tactical abilities, but they don't have that foundation. And that foundation is in the personal leadership of understanding who you are, what is your growth, what is your development, what is your shit that you have to shovel out of the way, what is the stuff you've got to get moved to the side, and on that, what are your skills with people? Because, you know, the world of tactical, strategic leadership on its own, dead in the water. Is it important? Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. But if you think that means that you don't have to work on yourself and you don't have to know your leadership skills in dealing with people, you are a leader waiting to fail, because the best strategies in the world are carried out by people. Best tactics in the world are carried out by people. And if you can't connect with your people, if you don't know how to be with yourself, then you don't know how to be with people, and this stuff is going to fall away. And it's the reason, and forgive me, Sharon, because I don't know if anybody usually brings it up. It's the reason I wanted to bring up the weight loss thing, because this is an internal battle that I think that people miss. You know, we judge things on the surface. I have a very good friend. He owns and runs one of the most recognized and high value coaching companies in the world. So, I mean, they're in 40 countries. I mean, it's massive, right? He used to be a client and a student of mine for many, many years. Amazing human being. And we had a conversation once about how if him and I were walking down the street and somebody passed us by, they would say, fat guy, fit guy, you know, because I was in shape, mate. And I'd say, you know, and I said to him, the stupidity of it is that he would stand on a treadmill next to me and would kick my ass. I mean, he was way cardio fitter than I was back then, 20 years ago. He was in wicked cardio shape. But there's this wanting to judge things on the surface rather than the truth of what something is. And on the surface, you get to be in the C-suite, so you go, oh, okay, well, I've got the little tag on my desk that says this, so everybody's going to look at me like that. They are, but you still have to prove it. You still have to show up every single day and do the thing. Yeah. And what that means is, and I love the analogy of weight loss, because I honestly, I've had several of my clients have been from this world, one who's also an expert on that area. And I talk about the only acceptable prejudice is that around weight. We are not allowed to look at somebody and go, oh, that's your color or that's your gender. We're not allowed to do that. That's politically incorrect.
Absolutely.
But we can say, oh, fat person, and actually make that a generalization. It annoys the shit out of me. It really upsets me because it's assuming, just as we assume on the other end, by the way, oh, thin person, they're fit. Listen, I know heavy people who would kick your ass on the treadmill, who would kick your ass in the gym.
Perfect example. And I should say that through the weightlifting, I've lost 80 pounds, which is no mean feat. And yes, I still have some more to lose, but I love going to the gym. I particularly love working out in the pit because I love to break people's opinions. I remember once I was on that same machine and there was a gentleman next to me working out doing something. He looked over and he went, wow, that's impressive. And I looked at him because, you're usually in your own zone. And I realized he was talking to me. And I said, I'm sorry, what do you mean? He said, wow, you've got 270 pounds you're pushing. He said, and he is fit. He had nice biceps, good body, great. But he said to me, I've been doing that for a whole year. And the most I can get to is 180 pounds. And you're doing 270. So then, reliving the moment, I started to laugh.
Right.
And I said, I hate to break this to you, but I'm actually just warming up at 270.
Beautiful.
And then he wanted to use the machine after me, and I promised him, because I kept adding the weights, I promised him I'd help unrack the weight afterwards. But my point here was, he had this view of me thinking, wow, it's pretty impressive, 270, thinking because he did 180, yes, I'm doing more than him, but at the same time, that's the most I can do. And instead, he is blown out of the water that I do way more than him. So yes, I agree. Being a person that is larger than most people for most of my life, I am sure that I've had people disregard my opinions, that have decided I can't contribute, whatever it is. And I learned from a very young age not to worry about what people think of me as far as my outward appearance. What I want to be judged on is how I show up as a person. Am I an effective leader? Am I a person of integrity? Am I walking my talk? Those are the things that I think leaders forget about because, like you say, they become a C-suite, they've got the little sign, and now it's almost like everyone has to bow to them. Everyone has to put their needs aside and just listen and be on edge. Am I doing the right thing? Is my boss going to be upset? And leaders have to understand that when those people come to work, they are bringing their life with them.
Absolutely.
And unless you're a leader who understands that, you are going to lose valuable people, or you're going to have people that are going to work for you that are totally disengaged. I was fortunate last night. I was at a fundraising event, and a gentleman, so I live in Toronto, this gentleman flew in from, I believe it was Colorado, to support this event we were at. And he is the one of three owners of a large sort of marketing company for supplements. So in the multi-million dollars. And I loved having a conversation with him so much because he says he likes to interview people and find out what their end game is and then support them. Even if it's not working with him for the next 20 years, if it's the next 3 or 5 years, what can he do to support their goals? Because he knows that when he does that, while they're engaged with working for him, even if it's 3 years, they're going to give their best. Every day, they'll show up with the very best that they have because they know that they're being valued. And at the end of the day, you can give your staff as much of an increase in salary as you want, but enough studies have been done to show that your employees want acknowledgement. Absolutely. They want to feel that what they do matters.
You got it.
And that's where I think a lot of leaders, whether it be at the C-suite level or director or whatever level, even if you're managing one person, it's about how you acknowledge. And in fact, when I talk about having to be a leader in your own life, I'm actually talking about even relationships, husbands and wives, children, cousins, whatever it is, customers. How are you acknowledging the importance of that person? Or are they just a number? Or are they someone just to serve your ultimate gain? You know, we read enough stories about CEOs that are getting millions and millions of dollars as a salary and then bonuses, yet their staff are just getting by and they're having to make cuts. And I'm not advocating that a CEO should not be getting, the salary or the bonuses that they get, but if they can also be doing what they can and acknowledging the contribution that the employees at whatever level are doing for them to be able to take home that money, they will be perceived as a much more valued leader.
Yeah, I think it's a very important piece. One of the pieces we speak about in the companies we work for is breaching your own bias, recognizing where your bias is and overcoming that. And weight loss is an example we actually use because I remember my very first speaking gig being judged very harshly before I spoke because I didn't look like a traditional speaker, and they were like, they made their decisions based on the way that I looked. And it's a very important piece is to understand that as a leader, you cannot allow your bias to get in the way, particularly today, because today, I'm in my 50s, and I can remember when I started in the workforce, if I don't have any, but if somebody had a tattoo, they were instantly dismissed. They were instantly like, of course you're not going to work here. We're not going to take you on. If you wore earrings, I've worn earrings since I was 15 years old. If you wore earrings, that was instant, you're not part of our, you don't. But we've already evaluated somebody's intelligence on a visual stimuli, on some external protocol based on our own bias that would make us miss some of the best people in the world.
Yeah.
The leading people in the world in anything you can think of don't look the way you think they should look. Because they've become successful enough that they don't give a crap. And when if you walk into Google or you walk into Facebook or you walk into these leading organizations, you're going to see people in shorts, in what we would call thongs, but we won't use that in North America, but in flip-flops, I'm trying to remember the word there, flip-flops or sand shoes, sports footwear, things that were totally unacceptable even 15 years ago. And these people are doing extraordinary things. And this is why I love the title of your book, which is, we've got to wake up to the world has changed. Stop leading like it was 20 years ago. You've got to shake up your own belief systems because your belief systems are your bias and they're in the way. You've got to really become present with what is going on. That's why I love what you're saying. Leadership for me, though, as you know, this is my area. It's the thing I'm passionate about is leadership. And I think that leadership is a grossly misunderstood subject. Like you, I believe leadership is internal first before it's ever external. And to really examine that leadership piece, we have to look at, well, who were the leaders in your life? Who were the people who taught you how to lead? And leadership, for me, in my observation of more than 30 years of doing this, is that when I've boiled it down, the realization is that the person who taught you leadership is not the person who was your first CEO or your manager or whoever it was. It was actually an unconscious process. It was mom or dad.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a tough question. And the tough question is, if indeed leadership is the foundation at an unconscious level, if indeed it starts with parenting, looking back, who was your most challenging parent and what did they teach you about leadership?
It's not a tough question at all. I would say my father, most definitely, and then secondly, my mother. Mm-hmm. You have to think back. We moved to Australia in 1970. That was before you had the internet, before you had Google, to be able to find out where you were moving to, what you were doing. Right. So you were taking a chance. And so my parents, they sold my dad's business and our home and packed us up on a train across Canada and in a 19-day ship ride, because it was, ocean liners in those days, not cruise ships, ocean liners. And we arrived in Sydney. Luckily, we were going to stay with my mom's best friend, her parents, because she was from Australia living in Montreal. We stayed with them for a couple of weeks. My father had no job. I don't even know to this day how much money he had in the bank, but it couldn't have been a lot. No. And he went out and he got a job. He had never sold before. He had previously been a taxi driver, and then he started a dry cleaning delivery service where he bought a van and he went door to door with these little cards he had made up that it was Worsley Dry Cleaning Service is really what it was called. and just went door to door. He was very tenacious. So for me, it showed me that you have to get off your own butt. You can't wait for someone to do it for you. And you also have to take care of those around you. So for me, family was very important. And my father expected us to work hard. He expected us to find a way if there was no way. And I have a perfect example of that going back to my airline days. In Australia, at the time I lived there, when I wanted to work in travel, if I wanted to work for an airline, it was that thing where they wanted you to be 25 years old and 25 years experience. Like, that's not even practical, right? But they do. And at the time I was working full time, I was probating people's estates when they passed away, which was eye-opening for me as a young person to see, the fact that some families don't stay together. Some people actually pass away in their home, and it's not until weeks later people realize that they've passed away, or families that fight over the belongings. I remember once having to, oh my gosh, we had to put a number on everything this person owned, and we put the numbers all into a bag, and the relatives pulled out the numbers. And I realized that's not really what I want to do with the rest of my life, is deal with things like this. No. So I was doing the highest degree in travel and tourism at the time in Sydney. But again, I couldn't get a job. So remembering what my father had done, I went to the Yellow Pages. For those of you that are old enough to know what a Yellow Pages is. If you're not, well, that's Google on paper. And so I called this first travel agency, and I said to them, this is what I'm doing. Going to school. I work a full-time job. I'm going to school 2 nights a week and doing travel. Would you consider me working for you for free on Thursday nights and Saturdays? Because that was the times that I could be available. And that was the days before people did internships. No one worked for free. And the first person I spoke to said no. And I thought, okay, that's no, that doesn't mean forever. I went to the second one there. The second person said absolutely. The only thing I had to do was pay for some liability insurance to cover myself because I wasn't an employee. But otherwise, I showed up. I still remember to this day, and I won't say the year of it, but it was a long time ago. And I wrote my first, those were the handwriting times. I wrote my first bus ticket from Sydney to Melbourne. That was the first official job I ever had in travel. So what it did for me was it showed me how to be tenacious and very creative, like my father had been. And the result of it was Ansett Airlines, which at the time was the domestic airline in Australia, they had an ad in the paper.
The Monopoly Airline.
Yeah, the Monopoly Airline. Yes, them and Trans-Australian Airlines, the two of them. So they had an ad in the paper for working in the reservations department, which with the airlines in those days, you worked in reservations for 2 to 3 years. If you were lucky, you got moved to another area in the reservations department, which sold packages like cruises and destination packages. And then if you were lucky, you got to the travel center. So I applied for this job. I met with the state sales manager. He was so impressed that I would work, and by that time I'd worked 4 months for free at this travel agency. He said to me, listen, I'm very impressed with what you've done. If you are okay with this, I have in my travel center, I have someone on maternity leave for a year. If you're okay, we will train you there and we will put you in the travel center. And then after the year, we'll see what we can do. Of course, I took the opportunity. I quit my probating job, went there. About 18 months later, I was doing an airfare ticketing course with Qantas, the main airline, which was the be-all and end-all job in those days. If you wore a Qantas uniform on the street, people would go, hey, they work for Qantas.
Yeah.
18 months later, I'm at their training for my first airline, Ansett. The trainer was so impressed with how I got into Ansett, he put in a good word for me. So 18 months later, instead of spending 2 to 3 years for a domestic airline and moving, I was working at the main travel center of Qantas. So because my father taught me the lesson of do what it takes, give a lot of value, find out what's important to other people and meet those needs, and never take no for an answer, I ended up moving back to Canada, and here I am now. Be it good or bad, I mean, my father and mom have passed away now for a number of years, and I still think back to those many lessons that they taught me, and it was all about service. It was about integrity. It was about excellence. And unfortunately, in today's leadership, at whatever level, I sometimes find that that's very much lacking. It's more of a What's in it for me? How can I get to the next level of my career? And who do I have to step on to do it? And that's just so unimportant, really, in the long run. What's more important is how can we all move together? How can I be the best leader possible that people will fight to be working for me because I lead my team so effectively?
It's interesting you just said, because I said that leadership starts in the home with parenting, but one of my central beliefs is that leadership is influence, and what I mean by that is what is the example you set, not by what you say, but by what you do.
Yeah.
And what you've just described there is leadership. It was leadership at the day you went to the internship, which didn't have that name in those days, but it was leadership there. It was leadership in every level of what you stepped into, was leading by example. Because one of the things I say to the people that I lead, and teach this to the CEOs, the C-suite individuals in the organizations that I work with, is you don't have the right to ask people to do things you're not willing to do.
Oh yeah, big time.
And invariably people don't get that. Jack Welch back in the GE days got that. I am not a fan of Jack Welch's leadership style at all, as it was. I know it's changed in much in the last few years, but when he was that guy, I didn't like his style at all. It was ruthless, it was cutthroat, but at the same time, he understood that I don't get to ask people to do things I haven't done. And so he started at the bottom and he worked his way up and he swept the floors and he went out and willingly swept the floors. And that's that same thing as what you're saying is what you've done is, I'm asking you to do this, but hey, dude, I'm not asking you to do what I've not done. I'm asking you to step up because I stepped up. I'm asking you to step into what's uncomfortable because I stepped up to what's uncomfortable. And that's the shake-up piece in your book that I think that people have to get, is that the shake-up is that you've got these fixed ideas in your head, and as we say in Aussie, give your head a shake, right? Yeah. Give your head a shake, because just because it's in there doesn't mean it's true.
No.
And that's an important piece of what it is that you're teaching and showing people. What is it? I believe that leaders in any area, people who are highly successful in whatever it is they do, as you are, as this business ninja, I believe that successful people are obsessed. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean that in a positive sense, that we are obsessed with certain things. The way that I explain it is, if there's a movie and there's a part in the movie that's about whatever you're obsessed about, that's the part you talk about. If there's a TV show that comes on, you have to binge watch it. You're going to be watching it. If there's a book that even has it in the title, you're going to be going there. What is Sharon Worsley just obsessed with? What is it you cannot resist observing, connecting with, communicating about?
That's a really great question. Wow. Well, it's interesting for me. You've heard the term guilty pleasure before.
Absolutely.
And for a lot of people, their guilty pleasure is chocolate or a fine wine. My guilty pleasure is people watching. Even on my Twitter handle, I talk about I'm a people watcher, because I think that you can learn so much. I know I have learned so much by what people do rather than what they say, and also what they don't do. So for me, I'm obsessed with watching people, not drawing conclusions, but watching the results and then seeing what happens. And then also seeing what they're not going to do. You talked a moment ago about leaders who ask you to do something and aren't willing to do it yourself. And I immediately thought back to when I was managing, the first time I was a manager, and it was a travel agency here in Toronto. I still remember getting the stamp out and stamping the back of the brochures with our address. And the staff used to go in the beginning, well, that's the receptionist's job. Yes, but the receptionist is busy. And then I'd go and grab them lunch. Well, that's something that we get the assistant to do. Well, you guys are busy. I've got a moment. I'm going to go grab your lunch. So it's about doing what it takes. The other thing, too, in regard to the question that I'm obsessed with is having standards. And I think that we would all succeed more in any area of our life if we had standards that we lived by. I don't mean necessarily hard and fixed rules that we can't change under a certain circumstance, because life presents many challenges. it's more a case of what are your values? For me, one of my highest values is integrity. The other one is compassion. So how can I exhibit that? How can I really step into that? So these really are some of the things that I feel very passionate about. The other thing is helping people become the best that they can be. And I know a lot of people say that, but I look for opportunities, and many times no one would ever know about. Because I don't think you necessarily have to show everything you do. And I find, unfortunately, in leadership, that's often what happens. We're told, well, the leader, I went to bat for you and I did this, and if it wasn't for me, it's like we don't need to know that. We just want to trust that you've got our best interests at heart. We don't need to know that you went to the owner of the company to protect your job or whatever it is. So I'm passionate about that. I'm also passionate about helping people realize how little it actually takes to make a difference. That it's not some big, huge swing that they've got to do and completely go in a different direction. It's those small little things we talked about earlier about compounding, making those small little changes. So if there's a leader that's listening today and thinks, wow, I could do a lot more with my team, how do I go about it? Because it just seems overwhelming. Just do little things.
So give us a couple of little tips that our viewers, our listeners can go, you know what, that's golden. I can go do that in the next 10 minutes.
I think it would be, first of all, acknowledging your staff. When was the last time if you got out of your office and walked around and talked to the staff in their cubicles and asked them how their weekend was and listened to them?
Yeah, so that's the key. It's one thing to ask. I see this all the time. Oh, yeah, well, I asked. And I said, I was in a meeting recently with a C-suite group, working with the chairman, the president, etc. I was working with this whole group. And I said, what do you know about your people? And he said, okay. And the president says, well, the person who works for me directly, his personal assistant, her name is this. Yep, I know that. Okay, I already knew that. So it was cool. Yeah. And I said, what else do you know about it? He says, oh, well, she's dating this guy, and she's doing this with this guy, and they're moving to this place and the rest of it. And I said, do you know if that's true? And he says, yeah, she told me. And I said, does anybody else know this person? And one of the other persons said, actually, I do know her. And I said, is he right? And he said, no, she broke up with him 4 months ago.
Oh my gosh, 4 months.
So, yes, he'd bothered to find out, but he hadn't bothered to stay connected and intentional and all the rest of it. And that's what I love about what you're saying, is that it's important to not just ask, but to actually take the time to listen repeatedly. Not just once. Yeah. You don't go out once and go, oh, I know my staff. You actually got to engage.
And add in what it is that you're... Now, I'm going to ask you, can you hear me okay? Because there's a huge storm outside.
Can hear you perfectly.
It sounds excellent because it's pelting away in lightning and thunder. So I think the universe is not wanting me to reveal all these great secrets. But what I was going to say is there's one example that I can tell you. Just recently, I was speaking to a group. Their background is, what were they? They were engineers, director and above, for a large telecommunications company, 14 of them, and they took me up to a resort, and I was doing a presentation with them because they wanted to talk about their culture, their leadership culture.
Yeah.
So knowing that they were engineers, they even told me we're not very touchy-feely kind of guys, and I thought, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to get them to do. So one of the first things I did was have them get out of their chairs, get into a circle facing each other in a roundabout, facing clockwise. And then I said, what I want you to do is I want you to massage the person's back in front of you. But as the person behind you massages your back, I want you to give them feedback on how well they're doing. So we went for this for a few minutes, and it was interesting too, because all of a sudden the circle started to move. And one of the guys was like, why are we moving? We weren't told we were to move, and now it's making it more difficult. So I let them go for a few minutes, and then we stopped, and then we debriefed. And that episode of walking around was very revealing, because they started talking about who started this, why were we walking around, what was the purpose? Okay, where in our business are we getting people to do things that has no purpose? And it was getting difficult for us to massage the person in front of us because we had to keep moving around. Where in our business are we doing things that are making it difficult? But then the interesting aha for all of them was, one of them said, I wanted to please the person ahead of me and listen for their feedback. And I said, well, what are we moving? We weren't told we were to move, and now it's making it more difficult. So I, knowing that they were engineers, director and above, for a large telecommunications company, 14 of them, and they took me up to a resort, and I was doing a presentation with them because they wanted to talk about their culture, their leadership culture. So which in this case modeled their superior, so whoever they reported to. But then this one man said it was so difficult to focus on that and then at the same time give feedback to the person behind me, which in this case represented their subordinates, the people that reported to them. And they realized that at some point they have to stop trying to please somebody and then help somebody else please them. It was about how instead can we stop and work together as a team.
Fabulous.
So it was an amazing experience. We actually ended up doing about 7 different activities like this over a 2-hour period. And it was very revealing to them, the things that they had not thought of before. Yeah. And because as they said, they were all engineers, they were coming from a different kind of mindset. And it wasn't just like a few of them were that way. They were all that from that background. Yeah.
So based on you, let's just go with that. Just based on you.
Okay.
If you could put only one thing on your gravestone, what would it be? One short thing on your gravestone, what would it be?
Wow. No one has ever asked me that question.
Well, in your book, you ask people what would they say at your funeral, so I'm asking you.
But nobody's ever asked me that.
So let's synthesize it right down. What's that one-liner on your gravestone?
That I made a difference. I made a difference.
You know what, Sharon? I'm going to challenge you on that because I think that's a bullshit answer. It's too superficial, and I'll tell you why. Because I know you. You and I have gotten to know each other over the last few years, mostly through online. We've had some conversations. But I would put on your gravestone this. She gave first.
Interesting.
Because in every conversation with you, you have always given first. Before anything else comes up, you look to give. And I think that I talked about Jack Welch earlier and not liking his leadership style. But in his later years, he's changed. And the reason he's changed, he wrote a book called The Generosity Gene. And the great leaders have this gene for generosity. And you have the generosity gene. And that's why I would say, I'm challenging you because I think it's a bullshit answer. It's too surface. The depth of it is that the truth of you, your own personal philosophy of how you live and how you lead is you give first. And I think that maybe that's a title for a book in the future for you. But it's what I see in you. And for me, that is an important thing that leaders need to get. Yeah. Because leadership can often be about, well, what can you do for me? What can you give me? I need you to hit the mark. But one of the things that I see you clearly demonstrating is give first.
It's interesting that you say that because I think this is a great area where we can be meaning almost the same thing, but we use different words to describe it.
Of course.
So I'm glad that you challenged me on that. I'm thinking though, when I said that I made a difference, it was in how I showed up in the world. For you, that's
well, I think it is the way you show up in the world. But I think if we say, and this is one of the things that I teach people around language, a lot of stuff around leadership language. And here's the thing, that language is subjective. And so when somebody gives me a vague answer, they say, thank you. I will say, for what?
Right.
I don't have access inside your head. You have to tell me.
You have to tell you why.
And so you say, I make a difference in the world. She made a difference in the world. Well, you gave a quarter to a homeless person once when you were 14.
Right.
That's probably not what you meant, but it's still a difference in the world.
It's not. And actually, when I say that I made a difference in the world, to expand it, so we'll expand it now, is not a one-off thing. It's
of course not. That's my point.
Yes. And so I'm glad that we have that opportunity to sort of unpack that every day in whatever way I can, I'm making a difference. It's not, and so I see that in leadership too. Sometimes they'll do something and then they'll rest on their laurels and go, well, I got my staff increasing their salary this year. And then they go back to the way they were as a leader, thinking it's done. For me, it's collectively, what are you doing to make a difference? So for me, it's, that I've made a difference, whether it be to a large group, whether it be to that homeless person, whether it be someone that's upset about something that I see and I go over, what can I do for you? And I don't know them. It's in those little ways. To me, that's what I take when I say that I made a difference. It's not just sitting now going, okay, I gave to you, Dove, and I'm done now. onto something else. Now it's about me. I find too that when you make it about other people, invariably it'll happen for you as well.
Of course.
Because it's how you show up that gets returned. And I think people forget that there are a lot of leaders out there that, quite honestly, I would call them cool leaders. They're not cool, in case anyone's listening. It's not cool, C-O-O-L. It's cruel, C-R-U-E-L. They're
Yes.
cool leaders because they're making it all about them. They're stepping on the heads of other people so that they can get some sort of adulation, so they can get their bonus, whatever it is. And that's where I get into the whole wake up way of changing your mindset and seeing what the reality really is. And then finally, the last part of my philosophy is how you show up.
Yes.
And it's about showing up fully in all areas of your life. Whether you're an ER doctor, whether you're a school teacher, or you're CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or you're the mom looking after your kids, it's how you show up. And, you know, I sent you a copy of the book to read it. You'll probably notice that a lot of what is contained in that book is real life situations, going back to my guilty pleasure of People Watcher. It's watching how people are showing up in any area of their life. And, you know, there's one story actually I'd like to share. There's so many great stories there, but there was one story that I have so many favorites in there, but the one I want to talk about is this woman who was in the Bermuda Army Regiment. And she was the first female trainee officer in about 5 years to go through this program. And at the beginning, I didn't even know Bermuda had an army, so that was a nice thing to find out. And they were clients of mine at the hotel. They would come up to Ontario, so our province, and do their final testing, where they would jump out of helicopters. They'd have 60-pound rucksacks on their back. They would do whatever it was to go through their junior officer training. And so after they would finish that, they'd come to Toronto. They'd stay at our hotel for a couple of days. And they always had an evening event where they would celebrate and have dinner. And I remember this one year where this woman was there. I sat across from her, and one of the officers stood up and shared the story with us and congratulated her. What had happened was, a few days before she was due to leave on a plane to come to Ontario, she and her fiance had been in a terrible car accident. And as I looked across, I could see all the scrapes on her arms. And at first I thought it was probably because she'd been jumping out of, helicopters and looking on the ground. But there were a lot of bruises from that accident. And more importantly, I found out that her fiance had died in this accident. Now, the officers that were running the training had tried to dissuade her from coming on the training because, of course, that was a good reason not to.
Sure.
But she had said that she had committed to herself, her fiance, and to the troops that she would be on this event no matter what. And if I remember correctly, I don't even think she made the funeral. So she came out and went up to Northern Ontario. A few days in, she had hit this mental wall. I think probably the reality of everything pretty much set in. Well, when you're that far north of a city, you can't just leave your troops and, leave. You had to stay. I was so impressed with all the junior officer candidates, and the officers of the regiment basically physically and mentally held her up so that she could complete her training and be there that night. And I remember I've got goosebumps as I think about it. I remember standing there in front of her. She sat there and we all stood and clapped and cheered her because she showed us really what a good leader was. That she was staying true to her integrity and her promise to be on this mission, and that she was going to do it no matter what. But more importantly, all these other leaders were there to help her. So other junior officers at the same level as her, they used their personal leadership to be able to fill in the gaps that she had. And for me, I've met some amazing people in my life, but I will never forget that particular event. And so my book really talks about a lot of these different people that I've run across and the lessons I've learned or other people could learn, as well as obviously things that I've done or not done in my life as well, that hopefully, and the book is split up in those 3 sections, that as you read through it, you get an opportunity to question yourself. I even have at the end of every chapter points to ponder, where I ask the reader, okay, you've read this, now what can you take out of it? How can you apply it in your life?
But what a great story to finish up on.
Yeah.
Because, yes, I love her leadership commitment and her integrity. but I also love the inspired leadership of everybody around her,
Yeah.
who would willingly carry her through. And this is what great leadership is. Great leadership is not only leading others, but showing others how to lead. And they stepped up and as you said, physically, emotionally, psychologically lifted her up. What a powerful, powerful message. Sharon, it's been fabulous having you on the show. Please share with our viewers and our listeners where they can find out more about you, the services that you offer, and how they can tap into the wonderful resources that you have.
Thank you. So people can go to SharonWorsley.com, which is SharonWors for sugar, LEY.com, or just send me an email at info@SharonWorsley.com. I would love to have a conversation with anyone that wants to check out their leadership style, what they're doing, what they could do more. Thank you.
And they'll be able to find out about the book on Amazon and on your own website, of course. Yes,
it'll be released shortly. And if they're interested, I think that they will get some great nuggets out of the information. We've shared a lot of information that's contained in the book. And I appreciate mostly the opportunity that you gave me to talk about my philosophy of leadership, which, as we talked about already, it starts at a more personal level. If anyone can go away and think of one thing, think of that 20-story hotel and how, if that's an analogy for your leadership, how deep the foundation you want to build to support that.
It's a great message, and it's an important message, and I encourage everyone. I say to you every show, as you listen and as you tune in, please don't just listen to the freaking show. You know, information is worth the hole in the donut. Application is what creates transformation. Get out there, use what you've learned. Sharon shared some wonderful nuggets here, some great insights for you to actually take a look at yourself. And and I really want to thank Sharon, because we got personal, we got into the weeds, and we went full Monty, we pulled back the screen, we looked inside. When we talk about these things like whether it's weight loss or whether it's climbing through personal tragedy, or whether we talk about, somebody else's tragedy that you're impacted by with the hotel and the killing of a boy, all those things that you've got to get as a leader, those things that all fashion you. They all form you as a leader, and dismissing them and trying to be rigid about your leadership will never, ever work. Let me rephrase. It may have worked in the 1940s and 50s and maybe even the early 60s, but since the mid-70s, it's faded away, and now it doesn't work even slightly for if you want to create loyalty. And I want you to remember that the research consistently shows that the challenges facing the most successful companies are somewhat counterintuitive, in that the fastest growing companies often hit the point where they realize that they're spending a fortune on attracting, training, and developing talent, but they also have an alarming rate of employee turnover. If you're sick of training and developing talent only to have them leave you before you've had a return on your investment, and that they're not engaged, as Sharon and I have talked about, and that they're leaving you, then reach out to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership soft skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization. And with our assistance, you can reduce your employee turnover rate by as much as 80% in as little as 120 days, thus evaporating those horrendous costs that it takes to train and develop individuals. fullmontyleadership.com, giving you the concrete soft skills for you and your organization to get you to the top and keep you there, because you cannot outsource authenticity. Also, remember to get yourself over to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool, valued at $197, and you get it absolutely free for being tuned in today. Matrix, like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com. Till next time, this is Dov Baron saying, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you need to wake up, shake up, and, say it, Sharon?
Show up.
Show up. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I'm out.